German Shepherd. Sleeps outside the baby's room. Every night, when mom finds out. Why? They break down in tears. What happened next will leave you speechless. Rain hammered against the windows like angry fists. Thunder cracked, splitting the night sky. Isla jerked awake, her heart racing. Something was wrong. She sat up, listening. The storm wasn't what woke her. Thud, thud, thud. The rhythmic sound echoed down the hallway. Isla glanced at the digital clock on her nightstand. 2:17 a.m. She reached over to wake Daniel, but her husband was deep in sleep, his soft snores barely audible beneath the storm's rage. Thud, thud, thud. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The sound grew louder as she approached the nursery. When she turned the corner, she saw him, Kaiser, their German shepherd, pacing outside baby Elio's door, back and forth, back and forth. His nails clicked against the hardwood with each step. "Kaiser," she whispered, "what are you doing, boy?" The dog froze, his ears perked forward, body tense as a bowstring. His dark eyes fixed on the nursery door. He didn't acknowledge her presence at all. Isla approached slowly. "It's okay, boy. Everything's fine." As her hand reached for the doorknob, Kaiser growled, a sound so low and threatening that Isla's blood turned to ice. He had never, not once, growled at her before. "Kaiser, what's gotten into you?" The dog's body shifted, moving between her and the door. His hackles rose, teeth bared not at her, but at something beyond the door. Isla's mouth went dry. "Move, Kaiser." He didn't budge. With trembling hands, she pushed past him and opened the door. The nursery was exactly as she'd left it, the nightlight casting a soft blue glow across the crib, where 6-month-old Elio slept peacefully. The window was closed, the curtains still. Nothing out of place. Kaiser slipped past her legs into the room, circling the crib, sniffing frantically. His ears flattened against his head, eyes darting to every corner, every shadow. "See? Everything's fine," Isla whispered, checking on Elio. Her baby's chest rose and fell with steady breaths. His tiny fists were curled near his face, peaceful and perfect. Kaiser whined, pawing at the floor beneath the crib. "Come on, boy, let's go back to bed." Isla tried to lead him out, but Kaiser planted himself firmly beside the crib. He wasn't leaving. She tugged gently on his collar, but the dog wouldn't move, his eyes fixed on something she couldn't see. "Fine." "One night," she muttered, too tired to argue. Back in bed, Isla stared at the ceiling, listening to the storm rage outside. Kaiser had always been protective of Elio since they brought him home from the hospital. But this was different. This wasn't protection. This was fear. "You're being ridiculous," she told herself, pulling the blanket tighter. "It's just a storm. Dogs get weird during storms." But as she drifted back to sleep, the image of Kaiser's rigid posture and frightened eyes followed her into her dreams. Morning came with weak sunshine and puddles dotting the driveway. Isla found Kaiser still in the nursery, asleep, but positioned strategically between the crib and the door. When she approached, his eyes snapped open, alert and watchful. "Daniel," she called out, balancing Elio on her hip as she entered the kitchen. "Kaiser slept in the nursery last night. He wouldn't leave." Daniel looked up from his coffee, dark circles under his eyes matching hers. "Probably the storm. You know how he gets?" "This was different," Isla insisted, settling Elio into his high chair. "He was scared of something. He growled at me." "Daniel?" "At you?" Daniel frowned, setting down his mug. "That doesn't sound like him." "Not at me. At the door, like he was protecting us from something." She lowered her voice, though Elio was too young to understand. "I think we should check the house, make sure everything's locked up tight." Daniel's expression softened. "Hey, it's okay. The storm probably just spooked him." "Maybe." Isla wasn't convinced. Kaiser had never acted this way during storms before. Throughout the day, Kaiser shadowed Elio everywhere. When Isla put him down for his nap, the dog resumed his position by the crib, watchful and tense. That night, the pattern repeated. As soon as Isla put Elio to bed, Kaiser took his post outside the nursery door. This time, Daniel witnessed it too. "See what I mean?" Isla whispered as they watched from the hallway. "That's not normal." Daniel approached Kaiser, kneeling to ruffle his fur. "What's up, buddy? You being a good guard dog?" Kaiser's ears pricked forward suddenly. His whole body stiffened. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. Daniel drew back, surprised. "Whoa. That's what he did last night," Isla said. "Like he hears something we can't." They both fell silent, listening. The house creaked and settled, but there was nothing unusual, nothing that would explain Kaiser's behavior. "It's probably just—" Daniel began. Kaiser barked sharply, jumping to his feet. Both Isla and Daniel startled. The dog's eyes were fixed on the nursery door, his bark urgent, demanding. "Check on Elio," Daniel said, his voice tight. Isla rushed to the nursery, heart pounding. Elio was still sleeping soundly, undisturbed by Kaiser's barking. The room was exactly as it should be, peaceful, quiet, normal. She returned to the hallway. "He's fine. Sound asleep." Daniel frowned, stroking Kaiser's head. "Maybe we should take him to the vet tomorrow, get him checked out." "Maybe," Isla agreed, though something told her this wasn't a medical issue. This was something else entirely. That night, unable to sleep, Isla set up the baby monitor on her nightstand, the screen glowing softly in the dark bedroom. Daniel had fallen asleep hours ago, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She watched Kaiser through the monitor, his silhouette visible in the hallway as he maintained his vigil. Hour after hour, he remained alert, occasionally rising to pace before settling back down. His dedication would have been touching if it wasn't so unsettling. At 3:12 a.m., something changed. Kaiser's head snapped up, ears forward. Isla sat up in bed, watching intently. On the monitor, she could see the dog slowly rise to his feet, hackles raised. Then she heard it. A faint rustling sound coming through the monitor's speaker. A sound that shouldn't be there. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs. She switched to the camera inside the nursery, expecting to see Elio stirring in his sleep. The crib was still. Elio hadn't moved. The rustling came again, louder this time. Kaiser barked once, sharp and warning. Isla shook Daniel awake. "Listen," she hissed, holding the monitor between them. The rustling continued, like fabric being dragged across the floor. But the nursery camera showed nothing moving. "It's probably just interference," Daniel mumbled, still half asleep. "Then why is Kaiser—" On the screen, Kaiser suddenly launched himself at the nursery door, barking frantically. The impact made the door rattle in its frame. "Jesus!" Daniel was fully awake now. They both scrambled out of bed, rushing down the hallway. Kaiser was slamming his body against the door, desperate to get inside. His barks had turned to frightened whines. Daniel grabbed his collar. "Kaiser, stop!" Isla pushed past them, flinging open the nursery door. Her trembling hand found the light switch. Light flooded the room. Elio was still asleep, somehow undisturbed by the commotion. The window was closed, the closet door shut. Nothing out of place. Kaiser broke free from Daniel's grip and raced to the crib, circling it, sniffing wildly. His behavior was frantic, desperate. "There's nothing here, boy," Daniel said, his voice gentle but firm. "See? Elio's fine." But Kaiser wouldn't be calmed. He kept returning to one spot beneath the crib, pawing at the floorboards, whining. Isla checked every inch of the nursery, under the crib, in the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing seemed amiss, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Kaiser knew something they didn't. "Let's take him back to our room," Daniel suggested. "Maybe if he's with us, he'll settle down." It took both of them to drag Kaiser from the nursery. The dog resisted, his nails scraping against the hard wood as they pulled him away. Even in their bedroom, he remained alert, facing the door, ears forward. "I'll check the footage in the morning," Isla said, clutching the monitor. "The camera records everything." But sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind against the windows, had Isla sitting up, checking the monitor. Kaiser never relaxed, maintaining his vigil from their bedroom floor, eyes fixed on the hallway beyond. Morning couldn't come fast enough. As soon as Daniel left for work, Isla settled Ulio in his playpen and retrieved the baby monitor. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the night's footage. Hours of nothing. Elio sleeping peacefully. The nursery still and quiet. Then, 3:12 a.m. Isla's breath caught. On the screen, the crib moved, just slightly, barely noticeable, as if someone had bumped against it. But there was no one there. She rewound, watched again. The crib definitely moved, and immediately after, Kaiser began barking in the hallway. "That's not possible," she whispered to herself. The footage continued. Nothing else happened. No more movement, no visible cause for the disturbance. Isla checked the nursery again, examining the crib closely. It was heavy, solid wood, not something that would move on its own. As she stood there, Kaiser entered the room, his nails clicking against the floor. He went straight to his spot beneath the crib, pawing at the floorboards. Isla knelt beside him. "What is it, boy? What do you see?" Kaiser whined, nudging her hand with his nose, then returning to the spot. It was as if he was trying to show her something. Isla lay flat on her stomach, peering under the crib. The floorboards looked the same as everywhere else in the room. Old, worn hardwood that came with the house when they bought it 6 months ago. Except, one board seemed slightly different. The grain didn't quite match the others. Kaiser barked once, as if in confirmation. "What have you found, boy?" Isla whispered, reaching out to touch the board. It felt cooler than the others somehow. The sound of Elio fussing in his playpen pulled her attention away. She would have to investigate later. That night, when Daniel came home, Isla showed him the footage. "See?" she said, pointing to the screen. "The crib moves, but there's no one there." Daniel frowned, taking the monitor from her. "It's probably just the camera glitching. These things aren't perfect." "And Kaiser? Is he glitching too?" Isla challenged. Daniel sighed, rubbing his face. "I don't know, Isla. Maybe he senses something we don't. Dogs have sharper hearing, better smell. Maybe there's a rodent in the walls." "For 3 nights straight?" Isla shook her head. "And why only at night? Why only in Elio's room?" They argued in circles, neither willing to give ground. In the end, they agreed to one thing. Kaiser could sleep in the nursery with Elio tonight. If he was so determined to guard the baby, they wouldn't stop him. Isla placed the monitor on her nightstand once more, unable to shake the feeling that something was very wrong in their home. As she watched Kaiser settle beside Elio's crib, a chill ran down her spine. What if Kaiser wasn't trying to keep something out? What if he was trying to keep something in? The thought haunted Isla as she tossed and turned, sleep evading her like a shadow in darkness. Every few minutes, she checked the monitor, watching Kaiser's vigilant form beside Elio's crib. The dog's ears remained perked, his body tense even as the hours crept by. Morning light filtered through the curtains when Isla finally dragged herself out of bed. Daniel had already left for work, his side of the bed cold and empty. She moved through the house on autopilot, making coffee with bleary eyes and a foggy mind. Kaiser padded into the kitchen, his nails clicking against the tile. For the first time in days, he seemed calmer, almost normal. He sat beside her, nudging her hand with his wet nose. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, kneeling to his level. "What are you trying to tell me?" Kaiser whined softly, then turned, looking back toward the nursery. The message was clear. "Follow me." Elio was still sleeping soundly when they entered the nursery. Isla checked on him, brushing her fingers against his chubby cheek. His skin felt cool to the touch, almost too cool. "Elio?" Worry spiked through her chest as she placed her palm against his forehead. No fever, the opposite, actually. He felt unnaturally cold. She lifted him carefully, cradling him against her chest. He stirred, eyes fluttering open, a small yawn escaping his lips. Relief flooded through her. He was fine, just cool from the night air. Kaiser circled the crib, then stopped at that same spot beneath it, pawing insistently at the floorboard. Isla laid Elio back down and dropped to her knees, examining the floor more closely. The board was definitely different, slightly newer than the surrounding wood, as if it had been replaced at some point. The edges were cleaner, the grain didn't quite match. "What's under there?" she murmured, running her fingers along the seam. Kaiser barked once sharply, making her jump. Isla focused on the window next, ensuring it was locked. It was, just as it had been every night. But as she stood there, a strange scent caught her attention. Something earthy and metallic, like wet soil mixed with something else she couldn't identify. She sniffed, following the scent. It was strongest near the crib, exactly where Kaiser kept focusing his attention. "What is that?" she whispered, wrinkling her nose. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, but unsettling, out of place in a baby's nursery. Kaiser whined, pacing anxiously around the crib. Isla checked every corner of the room, looking for the source of the smell. Maybe there was mold behind the walls, or something rotting beneath the floorboards. The house was old, built in the 1960s. Who knew what secrets it might hold? She called Daniel at work, describing what she'd found. A strange smell and a different floorboard? He sounded distracted, the background noise of his office nearly drowning out his voice. Isla, honey, I think you're overthinking this. Houses have repairs, especially old ones like ours. But Kaiser is a dog, Daniel finished for her. A very protective dog, who's probably just being overly cautious with Elio. It's what shepherds do. They protect. Isla bit her lip, frustration building. Will you at least look at the floor with me when you get home? Please? Daniel sighed. Fine. But I think you're letting your imagination run wild. I've got to go. Meeting in 5 minutes. Love you. The call ended before she could respond. Isla stared at her phone, a hollow feeling growing in her stomach. Why wouldn't he believe her? Why was she the only one who sensed something wasn't right? Kaiser nudged her leg, pulling her from her thoughts. His brown eyes were intense, almost pleading. Okay, she told him, her voice firming with resolve. Let's figure this out ourselves. Isla spent the rest of the morning researching the house's history online. The property had changed hands several times over the decades. Nothing unusual there. No reports of strange occurrences, no tragic history that might explain what was happening. She called the previous owners, an elderly couple who'd moved to Florida. I was just wondering, she asked carefully, if you ever noticed anything unusual in the nursery, the room we're using for our baby? Unusual? The woman echoed. No, dear. We used it as a guest room. Never had any problems. And your dog? Did you have one? A pause. Yes, a retriever mix. Goldie. She passed away about a year before we sold the house. Did she ever act strangely in that room? Bark at nothing? Seem nervous? Another pause, longer this time. You know, now that you mention it, Goldie never liked that room much. Always seemed to avoid it if she could. But older dogs get quirks, don't they? We never thought much of it. Isla's skin prickled with goosebumps. Thank you, she managed, ending the call with trembling fingers. That afternoon, she decided to let Kaiser lead the way. Show me, she told him, opening the back door. Show me what's wrong. The German Shepherd bounded into the yard, circling the perimeter, once before stopping directly beneath Elio's window. Without hesitation, he began to dig, his powerful paws tearing through soil and grass. Kaiser, stop! Isla cried, running toward him. But then she halted, watching as his frantic digging continued. He wasn't being destructive. He was searching for something. She knelt beside him, the knees of her jeans soaking up morning dew and loose soil. What is it, boy? What's down there? Kaiser didn't stop until his paws hit something solid. Isla's heart pounded as she brushed away the disturbed earth. Her fingers connected with something hard and cold, metal. Using her hands, she cleared away more dirt, revealing what Kaiser had found. An old, rusted key, its design intricate and antique. Beside it, wrapped in a deteriorating cloth, was a bundle of small objects. Isla's breath caught as she unwrapped the bundle. Inside were children's toys, a tiny wooden train, a hand-carved spinning top, and a small rubber ball, its once bright colors faded with age and exposure. These aren't Elio's, she whispered, a chill running down her spine. The toys were old, possibly decades old, and they had been buried deliberately beneath their home. Kaiser whined, nosing the key. The same metallic, earthy scent she'd detected in the nursery clung to these items. Isla wrapped everything back in the cloth and took it inside, her mind racing. What did this mean? Why were children's toys buried beneath their home? And what did this have to do with Kaiser's strange behavior? She placed the bundle on the kitchen table, staring at it as if it might speak and reveal its secrets. Kaiser sat beside her, unusually calm now that the items were in the open. When Daniel came home that evening, she showed him what she'd found. Buried toys? He picked up the wooden train, turning it over in his hands. Probably belonged to some kid who lived here years ago. People lose things, Isla. It's not unusual. Buried, Daniel. Not lost. Buried. On purpose. She pushed the key toward him. And what's this for? What does it open? He examined the key with a frown. It's old. Probably doesn't open anything anymore. He set it down, his expression softening as he took in her distress. "Look, I know you're worried, but finding some old toys in the yard doesn't mean anything sinister." Isla felt her frustration mounting. Then why is Kaiser so fixated on the nursery? Why does he bark at nothing? Why did the crib move on its own? "I told you, the camera probably glitched." "It wasn't a glitch." Her voice rose, startling Elio, who began to fuss in his bouncer. She lowered her voice, moving to comfort the baby. "Something is happening in this house, Daniel." "Kaiser knows it. I know it. Why won't you believe me?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. "Fine. Show me this floorboard you're worried about." In the nursery, Isla pointed out the mismatched board beneath Elio's crib. Daniel knelt, examining it closely. "You're right, it doesn't match," he admitted. "But that just means someone replaced it at some point. Old houses need repairs." Kaiser entered the room, immediately going to the spot and pawing at it, his behavior urgent and insistent. "See?" Isla said. "He knows something's there." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's move the crib and take a look." Together, they carefully shifted the heavy crib away from the wall. Kaiser barked excitedly, circling the exposed floorboard. Daniel pressed along the edges of the board, testing it. "It does feel loose," he murmured, his skepticism finally wavering. Isla retrieved a screwdriver from the toolbox and handed it to him. Daniel worked the tool into the seam and pried upward. The board lifted with surprising ease, revealing a small space beneath. "What the hell?" Daniel whispered, shining his phone's flashlight into the cavity. Isla's stomach dropped as the beam illuminated a small, dust-covered wooden box. Kaiser whined, backing away slightly as Daniel reached in and lifted it out. The box was simple, but beautifully crafted, its wood darkened with age. Carved into the lid was a name, one neither of them recognized: Leo. "Open it," Isla urged, her voice barely audible. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in faded red velvet, was a single photograph. A baby boy, no more than 6 months old, smiling at the camera. The picture was old, the colors faded to sepia tones. Written on the back in elegant script, "Leo Albright, 6 months." "Who is Leo Albright?" Daniel whispered, turning the photo over in his hands. Kaiser barked once, sharply, making them both jump. His eyes were fixed on the photograph, a low growl building in his throat. That night, Isla couldn't sleep. She sat up in bed, the laptop balanced on her knees as she searched for any information about Leo Albright. Daniel had finally agreed that something strange was happening, but he still leaned toward rational explanations. Perhaps a previous owner had hidden the box as a time capsule or to commemorate a loved one. But Isla knew it was more than that. The buried toys, the hidden box, Kaiser's behavior, it all connected somehow. She just needed to find the missing pieces. At 4:30 a.m., a notification sound from her phone jolted her fully awake. The baby monitor app was alerting her to movement in the nursery. With trembling fingers, she opened the app. The night vision camera showed Elio's crib, the baby sleeping peacefully. Too peacefully. He wasn't moving at all. Kaiser stood beside the crib, rigid and alert, his eyes fixed on something beyond the camera's view. Isla's heart raced as she watched. A shadow passed across the nursery floor, formless, indistinct, but definitely there. Kaiser reacted instantly, growling and slamming his body against the side of the crib. Elio remained completely still. "Daniel!" Isla shook her husband awake, panic rising in her throat. "Something's in the nursery!" She was already out of bed, running down the hallway before Daniel could fully wake. Kaiser's growls grew louder as she approached. Isla burst into the nursery, flipping on the light. The room was cold, unnaturally cold, her breath visible in front of her face. Kaiser stood protectively over Elio's crib, his teeth bared at an empty corner of the room. Isla rushed to the crib, her heart stopping when she saw Elio. He wasn't moving. His little chest wasn't rising and falling with breath. His skin was ice cold. "Elio!" She scooped him up, terror gripping her heart. "Daniel, call 911!" The moment she lifted Elio from the crib, he gasped, a sharp, sudden intake of breath as if he'd been underwater. His eyes flew open, body jerking with the force of his breathing. "Oh my God!" Isla sobbed, clutching him to her chest. "Oh my God, he wasn't breathing." Daniel appeared in the doorway, disoriented and confused. What's happening? He wasn't breathing, Daniel. He was just still. Tears streamed down her face as she held their son, who was now crying normally, his skin warming against hers. Kaiser hadn't moved from his defensive posture, still growling at the empty corner. Daniel moved to comfort Isla and Elio, but his foot caught on something. The wooden box, which had somehow moved from the dresser where they'd placed it to the middle of the floor. The photograph of Leo Albright had fallen out, face down on the hardwood. As Isla rocked Elio, trying to calm both him and herself, she couldn't tear her eyes away from that photo. A terrible suspicion was forming in her mind, one too frightening to voice. What if Kaiser wasn't protecting Elio from something in the room? What if he was protecting Elio from something that had happened in this room before? The night of terror passed into a gray dawn. Neither Isla nor Daniel had slept after finding Elio so still and cold. They'd taken turns holding him, watching his every breath, while Kaiser maintained his vigil at their feet. Daniel nodded, his face haggard with worry. "I'll call first thing when they open." But Isla shook her head. "Number emergency room. Now." They dressed quickly, bundling Elio in his warmest clothes despite the mild spring morning. Kaiser whined at the front door, clearly distressed at being left behind. "We'll be back soon, boy," Daniel assured him, patting his head before locking the door. In the car, Isla couldn't stop trembling. "He wasn't breathing, Daniel. Our baby wasn't breathing." Daniel gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. "We don't know that for sure. Maybe he was just sleeping very deeply." "His skin was ice cold." Isla's voice cracked with emotion. "You didn't see him. He was like a doll, not moving, not breathing." Daniel had no response to that. The rest of the drive passed in tense silence, broken only by Elio's occasional coos and babbles, unaware of his parents' terror. The emergency room was mercifully quiet at that early hour. A tired-looking doctor examined Elio thoroughly, checking his heart, lungs, reflexes, and temperature. "Physically, he seems perfectly healthy," the doctor concluded, making notes on her clipboard. "Temperature is normal, heart rate is strong, lungs are clear." "But he stopped breathing," Isla insisted, her hand protectively cupping Elio's head. "Last night, he wasn't breathing." The doctor's expression turned grave. "You witnessed this?" "I saw him on the monitor. He was completely still." Isla swallowed hard. "When I picked him up, he was cold. Then he suddenly gasped and started breathing again." The doctor frowned, turning to Daniel. "Did you witness this as well?" Daniel hesitated. "I didn't see him not breathing, but I heard my wife scream. When I got to the nursery, Elio was awake and crying." "And cold," Isla added firmly. "He was ice cold." The doctor made more notes, her brow furrowed. "I'd like to admit him for observation. We can do some tests, monitor his breathing overnight." Relief flooded through Isla. "Yes, please. Whatever it takes." While Elio was being settled into the pediatric ward, Isla stepped outside to call her mother, needing the comfort of a familiar voice. As she was explaining what had happened, her phone pinged with a notification, an email. She nearly ignored it, but something made her check. It was from a local historical society, responding to a query she'd sent the previous day about the history of their house. "Mom, I'll call you back," she said quickly, ending the call to read the email. The message was brief, but sent a chill down her spine. "Dear Mrs. Walker, regarding your inquiry about 1478 Cedar Lane, you might be interested in this article from our archives. The house has a rather unusual history. Feel free to visit our office if you'd like to learn more." Attached was a scanned newspaper article from 1978. Ayla's hands shook as she opened it. The headline made her blood run cold. "Local infant vanishes without a trace." The article detailed the mysterious disappearance of 6-month-old Leo Albright from his crib at 1478 Cedar Lane, their house. The parents had put him to bed on a stormy April night, only to find him gone the next morning. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder. The baby had simply vanished. A detail near the end of the article caught Isla's eye. The family's German shepherd, Rex, had been acting strangely in the days leading up to the disappearance, barking at the nursery door and refusing to leave the baby's side. Isla's phone slipped from her numb fingers, clattering to the hospital floor. The similarity was too precise to be coincidence. Kaiser, Rex, the nursery, the missing baby. Isla? Daniel appeared in the hallway. They want to run some tests on Elio. They need our consent. She looked up at him, her face pale with shock. Daniel, I know what's happening. Back in Elio's hospital room, Isla showed Daniel the article. His skepticism crumbled as he read, his face growing paler with each paragraph. This can't be real, he whispered, handing the phone back to her. It's a coincidence. Kaiser has been trying to protect Elio, Isla said, the pieces finally falling into place, the same way Rex tried to protect Leo Albright. Daniel ran a hand over his face. But protect him from what? Leo disappeared. Elio is still here. I don't know, Isla admitted, but I think whatever happened to Leo is trying to happen to Elio too. They spent the night at the hospital, taking shifts to watch over Elio while the other attempted to rest. The doctors ran tests, an EEG to monitor brain activity, a sleep study to track his breathing patterns, blood work to check for any underlying conditions. In the sterile hospital room, away from their house, Elio slept peacefully. No strange stillness, no cold skin, no gasping breaths. Just a normal, healthy baby boy. The next morning, the doctor returned with results. We've found something concerning, she said, her voice professional but gentle. Elio has episodes of sleep apnea, periods where his breathing stops during sleep. Isla gripped Daniel's hand tightly. Is it serious? It can be, the doctor replied honestly. In most cases, the brain signals the body to start breathing again after a short pause. But in severe cases, or if left untreated, it could potentially be dangerous. How dangerous? Daniel asked, his voice tight. The doctor hesitated. In very rare cases, sleep apnea has been linked to SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Isla felt the room spinning around her. But there are treatments, the doctor continued quickly. Monitoring systems, positioning techniques. We'll set you up with a specialist who can go through all the options. Isla barely heard the rest of the conversation. Her mind was racing, connecting dots. Elio stopped breathing at night, in their house, in the same room where, decades ago, a baby had vanished without a trace. When the doctor left, Isla turned to Daniel. It's not just sleep apnea, she whispered fiercely. It's that house. It's that room. Daniel didn't argue this time. What do we do? We need to know exactly what happened to Leo Albright. After Elio was discharged with a sophisticated monitoring system that would alert them. If his breathing paused for too long, they drove straight to the local historical society. The archivist, an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair, greeted them warmly. You must be the Walkers, she said. I'm Margaret. I was hoping you'd visit after reading that article. We need to know everything about Leo Albright, Isla said, still holding Elio close to her chest. Everything. Margaret nodded, understanding in her eyes. Follow me. She led them to a small research room lined with filing cabinets and shelves of leather-bound books. On a table lay several folders and a large, dusty tome. I pulled everything we have on the Albright case, Margaret explained, opening the first folder. It was quite the sensation back then. A baby disappearing without a trace. The whole town was talking about it for years. Daniel picked up a photograph, a family portrait. A young couple stood smiling, the woman holding a baby boy. At their feet sat a large German shepherd, eerily similar to Kaiser. That's them, Margaret confirmed. Thomas and Eleanor Albright with baby Leo, and their dog, Rex. What happened to them after Leo disappeared? Isla asked, bouncing Elio gently as he began to fuss. Margaret's expression turned sad. They never recovered. The police investigated for months, but there were no leads, no evidence. It was as if Leo had simply vanished into thin air. And the dog? Daniel asked, remembering the detail from the article. Rex? Margaret sighed. The poor thing was inconsolable after Leo disappeared. Thomas said he would howl all night, scratching at the nursery door. Eventually, they had to put him down. He became too aggressive, too unpredictable. Isla's arms tightened around Elio. Did they ever find out what happened to Leo? Margaret shook her head. Number. The case went cold. Thomas and Eleanor divorced a year later. Eleanor moved away. I heard she went to California. Thomas stayed in town but sold the house. He couldn't bear to live there anymore. Is he still alive? Daniel asked. Thomas Albright? Yes, as far as I know, Margaret replied, shuffling through the papers. He never remarried, never had more children. Last I heard, he was living in the assisted living facility on Maple Street. Isla and Daniel exchanged a glance. We need to talk to him, Isla said. Margaret nodded. I thought you might. I took the liberty of calling over there this morning. He's agreed to meet with you. The Sunny Pines Assisted Living Facility lived up to its name, bright, cheerful, and surrounded by tall pines that cast dappled shadows across the manicured lawn. Thomas Albright was waiting for them in the common room, a thin, frail man with tufts of white hair and watery blue eyes. You're the new owners, he said as they approached, his voice surprisingly strong for his fragile appearance. His gaze immediately fixed on Elio. And this is your boy. Yes, Isla said, settling into the chair across from him. This is Elio. Thomas's hand trembled as he reached out, not quite touching the baby. Same age, he murmured, just about the same age Leo was when... He trailed off, lost in painful memories. Daniel cleared his throat gently. Mr. Albright, we need to ask you about what happened to your son. The old man's eyes clouded with tears. No one believed me back then. They thought I was crazy with grief. Maybe I was. Believed what? Isla pressed, a sense of urgency building within her. That something in that house took my boy. Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper. Something that wasn't natural. Isla felt a chill run down her spine. Our dog, Kaiser, he's been acting strangely, guarding our son's room, barking at nothing. Just like Rex, Thomas nodded, unsurprised. He knew. Dogs always know. Know what? Daniel asked, leaning forward. Thomas stared into the distance, his eyes seeing something from long ago. The house has a secret, a hidden place beneath the floor of the nursery. Did you find it? Isla nodded. A loose floorboard. We found a box with Leo's photo. I put that there, Thomas admitted. After Leo disappeared, a memorial of sorts. His gaze sharpened suddenly, focusing on them with surprising intensity. But did you find the other place? The space beneath the house? Daniel frowned. What space? The old cellar, Thomas replied. Not on any blueprint, sealed off decades before we bought the place. Rex found it first, digging in the yard like a man possessed. I thought he was just being destructive, grieving in his own way. Isla thought of Kaiser digging in their backyard, unearthing the key and toys. We found a key, she said, buried in the yard. Thomas's face drained of color. The key to the cellar door. I buried it after I went down there. What did you find? Daniel asked, his voice barely audible. The old man's eyes filled with tears. Nothing. Nothing but cold, empty space. But I felt it. Something watching me. Something waiting. He grabbed Isla's hand suddenly, his grip surprisingly strong. The house doesn't want your son. It wants what's inside him. What do you mean? Isla asked, her heart pounding. His breath, Thomas whispered, his eyes wide and fearful. His life force. It's feeding on him, just like it tried to feed on Leo. Daniel began to protest, but Isla cut him off. Elio stops breathing at night, she said. The doctor said it's sleep apnea, but... Thomas nodded grimly. Leo had the same condition. The doctors told us it was nothing to worry about, that he'd grow out of it. His voice broke. But something in that house knew. It knew he was vulnerable. What can we do? Isla asked, desperate for answers. Destroy it, Thomas said simply. Find the cellar, use the key, and destroy whatever you find there. As they left the facility, Isla and Daniel were silent, both processing what they had learned. Elio slept peacefully in his car seat, unaware of the dark cloud hanging over him. You don't believe him, do you? Daniel finally asked as they pulled into their driveway. About something supernatural? Isla stared at their house, so normal in the afternoon sunlight, with its white siding and blue shutters. I don't know what to believe anymore, but our son stops breathing in that nursery, and 40 years ago, another baby vanished from the same room. She turned to him, her expression resolute. I'm not taking any chances. Kaiser greeted them at the door, whining anxiously and circling Elio's car seat the moment they brought him in. The dog seemed visibly relieved to have them home, but his tension remained, his eyes constantly darting toward the nursery. "We need to find that cellar," Isla said, determination replacing her fear. That evening, while Daniel gave Elio his bath, Isla sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, the rusted key beside her keyboard. She was frantically searching every detail she could find about the history of their home. Property records showed the house had been built in 1937 by a man named Frederick Pruitt, a wealthy businessman who'd made his fortune in coal mining. The original blueprints showed a standard 2-story home with no basement or cellar, just as their real estate agent had told them when they bought the place. "That doesn't make sense," Isla muttered to herself. "Thomas said there was a cellar." She dug deeper, searching old newspaper archives for any mention of the Pruitt family. After an hour of searching, she found something, an obituary from 1952 for Frederick Pruitt's wife, Margaret. The cause of death wasn't stated, but a line at the end caught Isla's attention. In lieu of flowers, the family requests donations to the Children's Respiratory Research Foundation. Kaiser padded into the kitchen, nudging her hand with his wet nose. Isla absently stroked his head as she continued her search, focusing now on Frederick Pruitt himself. An article from 1954 mentioned Pruitt selling the house and moving to Arizona for health reasons. Another search yielded a death certificate from 1957. Frederick Pruitt had died of emphysema, a respiratory disease. "Respiratory problems," Isla whispered, a chill creeping up her spine. She looked down at Kaiser. "Just like Elio." The German shepherd whined softly, as if confirming her suspicions. Isla's search led her to a local history forum, where someone had posted about unusual features in older homes in the area. One comment mentioned breathing houses, homes built with special ventilation systems by wealthy homeowners suffering from respiratory ailments. Before modern medical treatments, the post explained, some believed that controlled airflow could help those with breathing difficulties. Some homes had elaborate systems built into the walls, crawl spaces converted to treatment rooms, even underground chambers designed to concentrate specific atmospheric conditions. Isla's heart raced as she read. Could that be what the cellar was? Some kind of primitive treatment room for respiratory conditions? Daniel entered the kitchen, Elio freshly bathed and dressed in pajamas. "Find anything?" he asked, settling the baby on his hip. "I think so," Isla said, turning the laptop toward him. The original owner had respiratory issues. His wife might have had them too. And look at this. She pointed to the forum post. People used to build special rooms in their houses as treatments. Daniel skimmed the information, his brow furrowed. So, this cellar Thomas mentioned could be some kind of breathing chamber. "Maybe," Isla said. "But that doesn't explain what happened to Leo Albright, or why Elio stops breathing in the nursery." Kaiser suddenly stood at attention, his ears perked forward. A low growl rumbled in his chest as he stared in the direction of the nursery. "He hears something," Daniel whispered, instinctively holding Elio closer. Kaiser bolted from the kitchen, racing toward the nursery. Isla and Daniel followed, fear prickling along their skin. They found the dog standing in the doorway of the nursery, hackles raised, teeth bared at the crib. Nothing seemed out of place, but the temperature in the room had dropped dramatically, their breath visible in small white puffs. "It's freezing in here," Daniel said, shivering. "The window must be open." But the window was shut tight. The cold seemed to emanate from the floor, specifically from the spot beneath the crib where they'd found the box with Leo's photograph. Kaiser pawed frantically at the floorboard, whining with urgency. "The key!" Isla suddenly remembered. "We need to try the key." She rushed back to the kitchen, snatching the rusted key from the table. When she returned, Daniel had moved the crib aside, exposing the loose floorboard. "It doesn't make sense," he said, tapping the floor with his foot. "Even if there is a cellar, the entrance wouldn't be through a tiny hole in the floor." Isla knelt beside Kaiser, who had calmed slightly now that they were taking action. Thomas said the cellar was sealed off. Maybe this was part of the ventilation system. Maybe it connects to the main entrance somehow. She pried up the loose board, revealing the small cavity where they had found the wooden box. But now, with the box removed, she could see that the space went deeper than they had initially thought. A narrow shaft descended into darkness. "Hand me your phone," she told Daniel. "I need the flashlight." Using the phone's light, Isla peered into the shaft. It extended about 3 feet down before opening into a larger space. The walls of the shaft were lined with metal, like an old air duct. "There's something down there," she said, her voice echoing slightly. "Some kind of room." Daniel passed Elio to her, then knelt to get a better look. "It's too small for an adult to fit through," he observed. "No way this was the main entrance." "Maybe it wasn't meant for people," Isla suggested, a terrible thought forming in her mind. "Maybe it was only meant for air, or for something small." "Like a baby," Daniel whispered, understanding dawning on his face. The implications hung heavy in the air between them. If the shaft was designed to draw air, or worse, to allow a small body to pass through, it could explain both Leo's disappearance and Elio's breathing difficulties. "We need to find the main entrance," Isla said firmly, her arms tightening around Elio. "Tonight?" They searched the house methodically, tapping walls, examining closets, pulling up rugs to check for trap doors. Nothing. No sign of a hidden entrance to a cellar or underground chamber. "It has to be outside," Daniel finally concluded. "The yard, that's where Kaiser found the key." Despite the late hour, they bundled Elio in warm clothes and headed into the backyard. Kaiser led the way, trotting directly to the spot where he dug up the key and toys. Daniel began digging with a shovel, expanding the hole Kaiser had started earlier. Isla held Elio close, rocking him gently as he fussed, disturbed by the change in routine. After 20 minutes of digging, the shovel hit something solid. Daniel dropped to his knees, scraping away soil with his hands to reveal a flat metal surface. "It's a door," he said, his voice tight with tension. "A cellar door." The metal had been painted to match the soil, camouflaging it against the earth. A small, ornate keyhole was barely visible beneath decades of dirt and rust. Isla handed Elio to Daniel and took the key from her pocket. Her hand trembled as she inserted it into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a deep breath, she turned the key. A loud click echoed in the quiet night, followed by the grinding of metal as the door unlocked. It was heavy, requiring both of them to pull it open, revealing a set of stone steps descending into darkness. "I'll go," Daniel said, handing Elio back to Isla. "You stay here with him." "No," Isla shook her head firmly. "We go together. I'm not letting you face this alone." Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. He found a flashlight in the garage, and with Elio secured in his carrier against Isla's chest, they began their descent into the cellar. Kaiser followed close behind, alert but no longer growling, as if whatever had disturbed him was no longer a threat now that they were confronting it directly. The stairs led to a small circular room with stone walls and a packed earth floor. The air was surprisingly fresh, not stale or musty as one might expect from a long-sealed underground chamber. Daniel swept the flashlight around the space. The cellar was mostly empty, except for a few items. An antique rocking chair, a small table with what looked like medical equipment, and against the far wall, a peculiar apparatus that resembled a primitive oxygen tank connected to a series of pipes. "It is a breathing chamber," Daniel murmured, examining the equipment. "Look at this. It's an old oxygen delivery system." Isla approached the rocking chair, a chill running down her spine as she noticed the small indentation in the seat cushion, exactly the size of a person who had sat there for countless hours. "Frederick Pruitt must have used this room for his respiratory treatments," Daniel continued, still inspecting the equipment. "The pipe system probably connects to the shaft in the nursery, bringing fresh air from the chamber to the bedroom above." But Isla wasn't listening. Her attention had been caught by something else. Marks on the wall behind the rocking chair. She moved closer, adjusting Elio in his carrier to get a better look. Names, dozens of names carved into the stone, each with a date beside it. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Look at this." He joined her, the flashlight illuminating the wall of names. Most dated back decades, the earliest from 1940. "Margaret Pruitt, 1952, Daniel read aloud. "Frederick's wife." Isla ran her finger over another name. "Anna Wilkins, 1963. And here, Michael Donovan, 1971. Each name had a small symbol carved beside it, a crescent moon. "These can't all be people who lived in the house," Daniel said, studying the wall. "There are too many." Isla's eye caught a name near the bottom of the list. "Leo Albright, 1978, she read, her blood running cold. Daniel, Leo's name is here. They stared at the wall in horrified silence, the implications too terrible to voice. If Leo's name was here, yet he had disappeared without a trace. These aren't treatment records, Isla whispered, clutching Elio tighter. These are victims. As if in response to her words, a cold draft swirled through the chamber, extinguishing their flashlight. In the sudden darkness, they heard it, a soft, raspy sound, like labored breathing. Daniel fumbled with the flashlight, finally managing to turn it back on. The beam caught something moving in the corner of the room, a shimmering distortion in the air, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day. Kaiser growled, placing himself protectively between the walkers and the strange phenomenon. "We need to get out of here," Daniel said, his voice tight with fear. "Now!" They backed toward the stairs, neither willing to turn their backs on whatever was taking shape in the corner. The shimmering intensified, forming a vaguely humanoid silhouette. Kaiser's growl deepened as they reached the foot of the stairs. Suddenly, Elio began to gasp in his carrier, his little face turning red as he struggled for breath. "He can't breathe!" Isla cried, panic surging through her. She frantically worked to free him from the carrier. "Daniel, he can't breathe!" The moment Elio was free from the carrier, the shimmering form in the corner surged forward, moving not toward them, but toward the pipes connected to the oxygen apparatus, toward the shaft that led to the nursery. Understanding flashed in Isla's mind with horrifying clarity. "It's trying to get to him through the shaft. It wants his breath." Daniel grabbed Isla's arm, pulling her up the stairs as Kaiser barked furiously at the advancing shimmer. They burst into the night air, slamming the cellar door behind them. Elio's breathing normalized almost immediately, his desperate gasps giving way to normal, healthy inhalations. Color returned to his cheeks as Isla rocked him, tears streaming down her face. "We have to leave this house," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Tonight, they packed essentials hastily, clothes, Elio's supplies, important documents. Within an hour, they were in the car, Kaiser in the back seat beside Elio's car seat. They drove to a hotel on the other side of town, checking in just before midnight. In the safety of the hotel room, with Elio sleeping peacefully in a portable crib, Isla and Daniel tried to make sense of what they'd discovered. "It's not possible," Daniel said, running his hands through his hair. "Ghosts don't exist. Entities that feed on breath don't exist." "Then explain what we saw," Isla challenged. "Explain the names on the wall. Explain why Elio stops breathing in that house, but is fine everywhere else." Daniel had no answer. "Tomorrow," Isla said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're taking Elio to a specialist, the best pediatric pulmonologist we can find. I want to know exactly what's happening with his breathing." The following morning, they called every hospital within a 100-mile radius, finally securing an emergency appointment with Dr. Eleanor Chen, the head of pediatric pulmonology at the Regional Medical Center. Dr. Chen was thorough, reviewing Elio's hospital records and conducting her own examination. She ordered additional tests, blood work, another sleep study, even a specialized scan to check for any structural abnormalities in his airways. As they waited for results in the examination room, Isla couldn't stop thinking about the cellar, the wall of names, the shimmering form that had reached for her son. Dr. Chen returned with a thick folder of results, her expression serious but not alarming. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker," she began, taking a seat across from them, "Elio has a condition called nocturnal central sleep apnea. It's relatively rare in infants, but not unheard of." "What causes it?" Daniel asked, holding Isla's hand tightly. "In Elio's case, it appears to be a developmental issue with his brainstem, which controls automatic breathing during sleep. When he enters deep sleep, the brain sometimes pauses its breathing signals." Isla felt a chill run down her spine. Pauses? For how long? In mild cases, just a few seconds. But in more severe cases like Elio's, it can be up to a minute or more. Dr. Chen's voice was calm but grave. "Without intervention, these pauses can be dangerous." "How dangerous?" Daniel pressed. Dr. Chen hesitated before answering. "In the most severe cases, prolonged breathing pauses can lead to oxygen deprivation, which can be life-threatening." The words hit Isla like a physical blow. "Are you saying this could have killed him?" Without proper monitoring and intervention, yes, Dr. Chen admitted. But the good news is, we caught it. With the right equipment and care, Elio can live a completely normal life. On the drive back to the hotel, Isla and Daniel were silent, each processing what they had learned. Dr. Chen had prescribed a specialized monitoring system that would alert them if Elio's breathing paused for too long, along with a consultation with a sleep specialist to determine if any additional treatments were needed. It explains everything, Daniel finally said as they pulled into the hotel parking lot. The cold skin, the stillness, why it happens at night. Isla nodded, staring out the window. But it doesn't explain the cellar, the names on the wall, the thing we saw. Maybe there's no connection, Daniel suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Maybe it's just a terrible coincidence. Isla turned to look at him. Kaiser knew Daniel. He knew exactly when Elio stopped breathing. That's why he was pacing, barking, trying to wake us up, just like Rex tried to warn the Albrights about Leo. In the back seat, Kaiser perked up at the sound of his name, his brown eyes watchful in the rearview mirror. But what about the other names on the wall? Daniel asked. All those people. They can't all have had sleep apnea. Maybe they had other conditions, Isla said slowly, pieces falling into place in her mind. Frederick Pruitt had emphysema. His wife might have had something similar. Maybe the house was built for people with breathing problems. And the entity? The shadow we saw in the nursery, the shimmer in the cellar? Isla shook her head. I don't know, but I think it's connected to the breathing. Somehow, it's feeding on it. That night, they didn't discuss returning to the house. It was an unspoken agreement between them. They would never go back. The monitoring system Dr. Chen had provided beeped steadily beside Elio's portable crib, tracking his breathing patterns as he slept. For the first time in days, Kaiser seemed truly relaxed, curled up on the hotel room floor, his vigil no longer necessary now that the monitor would alert them to any danger. Isla lay awake long after Daniel had fallen asleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of Elio's chest. Her mind replayed everything they'd discovered, the buried toys, the hidden box, the cellar with its wall of names, the shimmering presence that seemed to reach for Elio through the ventilation shaft. It made a terrible kind of sense. A house designed for respiratory treatments, with a specialized chamber connected to the bedrooms above. A system designed to circulate air, or perhaps to draw it away. And something that had learned to use that system for its own purposes. She shuddered, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. They were safe now. Tomorrow, they would look for a new place to live, somewhere far from Cedar Lane and its deadly secrets. As she finally drifted towards sleep, a thought surfaced in her exhausted mind. The shadow they'd seen passing across the nursery floor in the baby monitor footage. It hadn't been Kaiser, as she'd first thought. It had been Rex, still guarding the room where he'd failed to save Leo Albright all those years ago. The next morning, Isla woke to find Daniel already up, speaking quietly on his phone by the window. Kaiser lay at his feet, ears perking up as Isla stirred. Yes, I understand, Daniel was saying. We'll be there at 10. He ended the call, turning to Isla with a grim expression. That was Thomas Albright's nurse. He's asking to see us again. Says he has something important to tell us. Isla glanced at Elio, still sleeping peacefully. Did he say what it was about? No, just that it's urgent. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Isla recognized as a sign of his anxiety. Do you want to go? She nodded without hesitation. He might have answers we still need. Thomas Albright looked frailer than he had just days before, as if their previous conversation had drained some vital energy from him. He sat in a wheelchair by the window of his room, a plaid blanket draped over his knees despite the warm spring day. You came, he said, relief evident in his voice as they entered. His eyes immediately sought out Elio, secure in Isla's arms. The boy is well? Yes, Isla confirmed, settling into a chair beside him. We've learned he has a condition called sleep apnea. It makes him stop breathing sometimes when he's asleep. Thomas nodded slowly. Just like Leo. The doctors told us the same thing. His gaze drifted to Kaiser, who had positioned himself protectively beside Elio. And your dog knew, just like Rex. We found the cellar, Daniel said quietly. And the names on the wall. The old man's hands trembled in his lap. Then you understand. Not entirely, Isla admitted. We saw Something there. Something that seemed to affect Elio's breathing. But we don't know what it is or why it's in our house. Not your house anymore, I hope, Thomas said sharply, suddenly more alert. No, Daniel assured him. We're not going back. But we need to know what happened to Leo. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Thomas was silent for a long moment, his watery eyes fixed on some point beyond them. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. The house was built for breathing, he began. Frederick Pruitt was dying of emphysema. He believed in old remedies, ancient cures. The cellar was his creation, a healing chamber, he called it. But the names on the wall, Isla prompted gently. Names of the dead, Thomas confirmed, his voice breaking. All who used the chamber and died anyway. Pruitt's way of honoring them, I suppose. He added his wife's name when she passed, and his own name was added by the next owner when he died in Arizona. But Leo didn't die in the chamber, Daniel pointed out. He disappeared. Thomas's face crumpled, decades of grief etched into every line. He didn't disappear. He died, in his crib while we slept. Sleep apnea, the doctors had said. Nothing to worry about. He'll grow out of it. Bitter anger tinged his words. We found him in the morning, no breath, no life, cold as ice. Isla's arms tightened around Elio, her heart breaking for the man's loss. We were mad with grief, Thomas continued. I carried him down to the cellar. I'd discovered it weeks before, been fascinated by its purpose. I thought perhaps the chamber could restore his breath somehow. He closed his eyes, tears seeping from beneath the lids. I laid him in the chair, opened the valve on the oxygen tank, and I prayed. His eyes opened again, haunted by memories. Nothing happened, of course. But as I sat there, holding my dead son, I felt it. Something in the room with us. Something hungry. A chill ran down Isla's spine. Kaiser shifted closer to her, a low whine building in his throat. It spoke to me, Thomas whispered. Not in words, but in feelings, impressions. It offered to return Leo's breath, to make him live again. What did it want in exchange? Daniel asked, though his face suggested he already knew the answer. More breath, Thomas replied simply. It had been feeding for decades on the last breaths of the dying in that chamber. But it wanted more. It wanted life, not just death. Isla felt sick. You didn't. No, Thomas said firmly. Even in my madness, I knew such a bargain would be an abomination. I refused. I took Leo's body and left. We told everyone he had disappeared. How could we explain what really happened? That our baby had died while we slept, that I had carried him to a secret chamber and been offered a devil's bargain by something not of this world. So you buried him? Daniel said softly. Thomas nodded. In a private ceremony. Just Eleanor and me. The official report still lists him as missing. He leaned forward suddenly, gripping Isla's hand. But the thing in the cellar didn't forget. It found a way to feed without making bargains. Through the ventilation system, it could reach the bedrooms above. It could draw the breath from the vulnerable. Those with breathing conditions, Isla realized, like Elio. Yes. Thomas released her hand, sinking back into his wheelchair. That's why Rex became so protective. He sensed what was happening, tried to warn us. By the time we understood, it was too late for Leo. Kaiser growled softly as if confirming the old man's words. After Leo died, Rex wouldn't leave the nursery, Thomas continued. Day and night, he stood guard. Eventually, he became aggressive, barking, growling at nothing we could see. The vet said he'd gone mad with grief. We had him put down. His voice broke again. Another loss I'll never forgive myself for. The shadow in the nursery, Isla said, remembering what she'd seen on the monitor. It wasn't Kaiser blocking the light. It was Rex, wasn't it? Still guarding the room. Thomas looked up sharply. You saw him? On the baby monitor, a shadow passing across the floor when there was no one in the room. The old man nodded, tears flowing freely now. He's still trying to make amends, still trying to protect where he failed before. They sat in silence for several minutes, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Finally, Daniel spoke. What should we do about the house? About the entity in the cellar? Thomas's expression hardened. Destroy it. Seal the chamber permanently. Make sure it can never feed again. The next day, Daniel returned to the house alone. Ayla had refused to let Elio anywhere near the property, and she stayed at the hotel with him and Kaiser while Daniel undertook the grim task ahead. He carried with him all they would need: bags of quick-setting concrete, tools to permanently seal the cellar door, and, at Thomas's insistence, a vial of holy water from the local church. "I'm not religious," Daniel had protested when Thomas had pressed the vial into his hands. "Neither was I," the old man had replied, "until I met something that had no explanation in our world." As Daniel worked to seal the cellar entrance, pouring concrete over the metal door, after securing it with heavy chains and locks, he felt it, a cold presence watching him from below. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, but he continued his work, determined to protect his family from the hungry thing that lurked beneath their former home. When he finished, he sprinkled the holy water over the setting concrete, feeling slightly foolish but unwilling to leave any protection untried. As the last drops fell, he could have sworn he heard a distant, angry hiss from beneath the earth. Daniel returned to the hotel covered in concrete dust, but with a lightness in his step. "It's done," he told Isla, kissing her forehead. "The cellar is sealed for good." They put the house on the market with full disclosure about Elio's breathing incidents there, describing it as possible environmental factors affecting respiratory conditions. The price they asked was well below market value, with the stipulation that the new owners must never dig in the yard where the cellar entrance had been sealed. 2 weeks later, they closed on a new home across town, a newer build with no history, no secrets, no hidden chambers. As they moved in, Kaiser explored every room, his posture relaxed, his behavior that of a normal, happy dog. That night, they set up Elio's new nursery with his monitoring system in place. Kaiser curled up beside the crib, no longer frantic or fearful, but maintaining his protective watch out of love rather than desperation. "Do you think it's really over?" Isla asked as they stood in the doorway, watching their son sleep peacefully. Daniel slipped an arm around her waist. "Yes. Whatever was in that cellar is sealed away for good." "And Rex? Do you think he's still in the old house? Still guarding the nursery?" Daniel considered this. "I don't know. Maybe now that the danger is gone, he can finally rest." The news of their ordeal spread quickly through their circle of friends and family, then beyond, as people shared the story of the dog who had saved a baby from a mysterious entity. They received countless messages from people telling similar stories, of pets who had sensed illness, danger, or death before their owners were aware. A local veterinary clinic even presented Kaiser with a mock Medal of Honor during a small ceremony, recognizing his extraordinary vigilance. The German Shepherd accepted the attention with dignified grace, though he seemed most content when simply lying beside Elio's crib, watching over his boy. 6 months later, Dr. Chen delivered wonderful news. Elio's sleep apnea was improving with treatment. The breathing pauses were shorter and less frequent. "Many children do grow out of it," she explained during a follow-up appointment. "Elio's making excellent progress. With continued monitoring and care, I expect him to make a full recovery." That night, as Isla rocked Elio to sleep, she found herself thinking about the connection that had formed between her son and Kaiser. The dog lay at her feet, his eyes never leaving the baby in her arms. Some might call it coincidence that they had adopted a German Shepherd just months before Elio was born. Some might say it was mere animal instinct that led Kaiser to guard the nursery so fiercely. But Isla knew better. She had seen the shadow on the baby monitor, Rex guiding Kaiser, showing him how to protect where he had failed. She had felt the presence in the cellar, hungry for her son's breath. And she had witnessed the unbreakable bond between a child and his guardian. As she placed Elio in his crib, she knelt beside Kaiser, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. "Thank you for saving my baby." Kaiser licked her cheek once, then settled into his usual spot beside the crib, his mission no longer desperate but eternal, to watch over the child he had saved, the family he loved. In the quiet of the night, as the household slept peacefully in their new, unburdened home, Isla dreamed of 2 German shepherds running through endless fields, one young and strong, one translucent and shimmering in the sunlight. Together in their eternal watch, guardians forever bound by their shared purpose, to protect the innocent from the things that lurk in the shadows, waiting to steal the very breath of life. If you believe animals have instincts beyond our understanding, share this story. And if you've ever had a pet who sensed something before you did, tell us in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will leave you speechless.